funk, thoughts deep, boys steeped in the depths that he sunk. Big stress, depressed in the middle of fall. Sky gray, I late in the thick of it all. I wonder, how long can a human survive just staying alive or carrying the rest of the tribe? Waiting for the day to arrive or struggling dies, and I be doing way, way more than getting by. So why? Cop myself a cup of coffee, sip of water in it softly, cleansing me of stress I hold. Hey, cop myself a cup of coffee, sip of water in it softly, cleansing me of stress I hold. Realize life is so much more than just living a day. Every day I can sit and reflect and breathe and connect to myself and know that I've been given. See, giving up is not an option. So when I'm looking at gray skies, I'll be adopting a new way to deal with a test. Lord, relieve me of stress. The rain be looking like when blessings drop in. And so I cop myself a cup of coffee, sip of water, rain it softly, cleansing me of stress I hold. Coffee, sip of water, rain it softly, cleanse me of stress I hold. Hey, here we go. Yeah. Let's do this. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3. In times of test, let no harm beset me, oh my Lord, oh my Lord.
Get yourself together before it's too late.
Yes. Good evening, and it is getting really late. Figuratively. Good evening, everybody. It's Divided We Stand. Still going at 9:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Still missing Dave. Have not heard from Dave at all. My wife spoke with Judy, I think, this week. But unfortunately, I don't have any news. As much as I'd like to have news. He hasn't responded. So we just wait. We just wait. The sad thing is, as you know, we really need him. Not just for the fact that it's Divided We Stand, but it's the times. He's somebody who's been through it as a reporter, somebody who dealt with the 60s. So, you know, he's the kind of person you need at this time. And it goes back to, hello everybody, really, hello. It goes back to, I guess, the conversation I had, a brief conversation, that who knows how this environment, the political environment, the social environment, who knows how that really is affecting us. And that goes for myself. I mean, and I've said this many, many times, in my opinion, we're witnesses to our own consciousness. And, you know, behind those eyes, you know, you just wonder how that brain's going to take these things. You know, it's like a different beast back there. I saw this video during the week that came up with a thought experiment based on an event that happened to the person. And he said something like, and this is to the viewer, so I'm going to throw this at you. How many times have you in your life done something during the day or the evening that you said, damn, stupid, why did you do that? You dumb MF, or why did you do that? And at first, you just pass it off and say, yeah, well, you're mad at yourself and blah, blah, blah. But if you really think about it, think about what's going on there. You're saying to something in there, like, why did I? Because you can't understand why you did it. And somewhere in there lies the idea that, you know, that brain of yours is doing things before you actually think you're doing them. So when you say to yourself, you dummy, why did you do that? That was stupid. It's kind of scary, you know? But it relates to, again, to the different external things that happen to us and how they can affect us. You know? And everybody's different. So, again, and I'm not saying that's what's happening with Dave. I mean, I've spoken with Dave in the past about this, and he himself has said, you know, he wouldn't doubt that this environment, this political environment, has had an effect on him, and it certainly has on all of us. I mean, Sandy, I know I just got your message. I read it about 10 minutes ago. And Sandy had mentioned that she lives in, Western New York. And she went to some raffle in a generally red area, and they didn't wear the MAGA hats. But I would bet when Sandy went there, she was very careful about what she said, or not have a blue hat or whatever. Now, they weren't wearing the MAGA hats, but I wouldn't push it, so to speak. You know, there's this, as Rousseau would say, there's this, you know, veneer on society. You know, it might not take very long for them to bring out what they really associate with, not so much the hat as the gun. You know, I'm not saying that would have happened, but I think you said something about being a firearms thing. I was not actually going to talk about firearms today, but I did want to bring that up. It does actually relate to what we're doing. And in fact, now that I think of it, in general, you know, as you watch these videos, for the exception of what happened, I think it was on Tuesday, because I was pissed off, I go live. But in all cases, whether it's live or whether I, you know, record something, it's pretty much off the cuff. And I'm not saying that's good or that's bad, but, you know, I figure that I've had enough experience in my life and enough studying and following the news, and I really, for what I do, I don't need to really do anything. And I remember seeing Veg's video this week, and it was interesting with Veg, because, you know, Veg usually has something in the background where he has the display relate to what he's saying. And Veg had this very, very open and heartful, I don't want to call it a speech, but what he said was right at the heart in his video. And you could see that it was just one thing. It was just Veg and what he had to say at that moment. And it was very powerful. And I think those things are important. I mean, you have to come across as yourself. You know, you have to be fair with yourself, or whatever's back there. So going on live today, there was this general idea of what I wanted to do. And I have a few things to show you, but this truly is live. You know what I mean? It's going to be spontaneous, but it relates to last week when I was so upset with Aileen Cannon. Aileen, however she pronounces it. And it was just the idea that she was going to come up with a ruling that made no sense. But it did make sense when I looked at it in my intuitive way. That the judge is a crook. That it's from the Roy Cohn school of, well, let's find out who the judge is and let's pick that judge. And that's what will really matter. And I had the same exact feeling with Cannon as I did with Bruce Schrader. When that trial started with Kyle Rittenhouse and you saw Bruce Schrader saying, you can't say this, you can't say they're victims, I knew automatically where it was going. And then as the trial proceeded, you actually saw images of Schrader and Rittenhouse together. Rittenhouse, he was able to pick the lottery. And then when they had him nailed to center concerning the weapon he had, he said, well, it wasn't exactly the exact weapon by the word, so we're going to throw that out. Because the gun was, whatever, I don't know. It was not quite as long as the one that was banned. It was a triviality. It wasn't from the essence of the law. So again, it's this intuition. This is the experience of crookedness that, of course, Lenny Bruce would talk about. Huey Long. So it was dirty. And here you have a person who's appointed in 2020. And then all of a sudden she's making decisions that are going to affect the total livelihood of the country. It's like the Twilight Zone. And I'm saying to I smelled this all along, not like I'm somebody who has a crystal ball, but most people don't really check the news out. They don't think about who this judge is. Some people do. But like Dave, being that journalist, you always had to look at it. I had the heart of a journalist because I knew what Dave was talking about. You'd have to know your story. And I felt it coming and coming. And I said, this is going to be a big story. Because she's going to be crooked. And like Ronnie Bruce said, if everything's crooked, then you don't even know what crooked is. Right? Yeah, that's why Lenny Bruce was way ahead of his time. So I wanted tonight to have a good way of really understanding this system that we have now. And all of you will have heard many of the things that I've said or will say already. But I think it's so important to actually see this. And it's very depressing because the very positions that are being filled in the courts are young people, and I say I should say relatively young people, as compared to my age. In their early 40s. When I think of people who are 40 years old, I think of students I taught. I don't know. When I started in Bridgeton, they're 40 years old now. So to me, they're still relatively young, and here they are making decisions for the world. Now, it wouldn't be that bad if, they were intelligent and reasonable. But the fact that there's something dirty behind this bothers me. And that, of course, is what Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has talked about ad infinitum, and I say that a lot, I know, for the last couple of years. And that is the Federalist Society. Tonight, let's keep it simple. I like that. We can go deep into the Federalist Society, what it is, and blah, blah, blah. But let's make everything get right to the marrow and say really what it is. It was a conservative movement to get conservative judges who look at the Constitution, word for word. But it's morphed into something really, really dangerous. They want to squash the liberals. And it's become a weapon. So if you look at the 6 conservative justices, all of them are part of this Federalist Society, which has been going on, I guess, since Reagan. But it was a way of trying to get the liberal judges out. So, of course, you had to have big money, and the Koch brothers were part of this. There were others, and I'm not going to go through names. But what is important for you and for me to remember is that even people like Trump couldn't get this done without their help. It couldn't have been done without big money, big interests. And that, again, is going to be the crux of tonight's show. Where are the interests? Where does it emanate from? And what is happening right now that is going to make our future bleak? So I'm not just saying that it's depressing. Let's look at the cancer tonight under the microscope. And I'm going to look at it myself as you're going to be looking at it right now too. And I don't see any way out of this at least in my lifetime, and I'm 62. So I'm going to have to come to grips with this, even if Biden should win again, or we should control the Senate. It's the courts. Okay? So I'm going to discuss first, before I put in some videos with Sheldon Whitehouse, on one of the major problems with this Federalist Society, which Aileen Cannon is part of. And she's the one who's, of course, appointing the special master. The DOJ had, a brilliant reply to her, basically trying to throw the pressure back on her. In other words, it would essentially humiliate her if she doesn't follow what they say. Now, today, or was it yesterday, she was to have received from the Trump attorneys a reason for why he should have those top secret documents. We're only talking 100 documents because the DOJ doesn't care about any of the documents. He can have the rest. What they care about, because this will be the charge eventually, is about those secret documents. They want to know, she wanted to know specifically now, because she's cornered, why you have those documents. Now, she, to me, is just giving Trump's attorneys, time to figure out the right sentence of why he needs it. Is he just going to say, well, I declared them declassified, so they're mine anyway? And you've got to prove it. I don't know what he's going to say. All I know is she said he had a day to do it. I'm surprised she didn't give him a year. But she shouldn't have given him any time. It should have been stated long ago why he had the classified documents. And he's not going to tell you the truth. Because if you have classified documents, It's obviously, they're worth something. He doesn't know for shit what's going on in those nuclear documents. Trump doesn't read that shit, right? Am I right? So, the one thing he does know is they're worth something. Maybe he sells them to the people who have money. Because remember, we were talking about money and power. Russia likes having the power, and then they get their money, and then here you get the money, then you get the power. He's playing both sides. He's playing both sides. So having that, and who has a lot of the money? Of course, Saudi Arabia. Billions. Right? They gave $2 billion to Kushner. They just don't give $2 billion away. What do they want? Israeli military secrets, nuclear secrets. Does he give it to the Russians? The Russians would pay for it. And maybe they did already during the elections. Now I'm just coming up with ideas. But my point is, with holding those documents, he knows one thing: they're worth something. Whether he owes somebody something or not, he knows they're worth something. But again, he doesn't know for shit what they mean. It's like Chinese talk to him. He doesn't know what's on there. He doesn't care. It's like stealing the Mona Lisa. He has no appreciation for the art of it. He has no appreciation for the danger of taking those top secret documents. But he knows they're worth something. Just like when somebody steals a famous painting in Europe. You hear that every year or two. And how do they get away with that shit? They don't hold on to the painting, right? They don't give a shit about, a Salvador Dali painting. They just want to sell it. And we can say, well, why this? It doesn't matter. The asshole is the asshole. There are assholes. What can you say? So let's listen to White House, because I think he's one of the real honest players in all of this. He has warned about this. And what I'm going to show you is a small clip, 2 or 3 minutes, in which there's something called a blue slip. Now, blue slips usually, it's thought of in business. I don't know, it was a movie called Hudsucker Proxy. A slip that had to be delivered to somebody. It was the most important slip that you would get as a CEO. It goes straight to the top. Well, a blue slip in the Senate was used for senators for, I guess, for the federal appointees and circuit appointees. And if you delivered a blue slip, there would be some type of complaint about something. So there had to be some discussion about that judge or that potential nominee if you had a problem with them. So the blue slip was important, especially if the blue slip's in your own state, right? I mean, if you were from New York and you're a liberal state, and all of a sudden nobody's paying attention to the blue slip, and the president's going to appoint somebody, like Trump did in New York, circuit courts. Now, the Democrats could do this too, and White House said, we really can't do this. We're going down the rabbit hole. Let me show you the clip, and we'll take it from there. All right, so let me take us to the web, I think. All right. And I'm going to get me out of here. You can hear me, I assume, right? All right. so there might be a little bit of an echo or whatnot. Let's do it. All right, so this is Sheldon Whitehouse. I'm going to roughly put it on the area in which he mentions this. Hopefully it's loud enough for everybody.
Pointed out that not only do we not have any voice over who gets appointed to the circuit court associated with our state, we don't even have the power to assure that it's somebody associated with our state. We have senators on this committee who believed that the appointee had no credible association with their state. And I warned actually about, I think it probably had Senator Kennedy in my eyesight, and I mentioned about, appointing a nice Brooklyn judge to a Louisiana seat. We've lost something very important when we undid the blue slip. To Senator Booker's point, I don't know how you put the toothpaste back in the tube. I'm eager to help find a way, but I will tell you what that way cannot be. It cannot be that when there's a Democratic president, everybody gets a blue slip, and it can be used to block circuit court nominees. And where there's a Republican president, the Federalist Society cranks up its turnstile, big donors choose the nominees, and everybody lines up and shoves them through irrespective of qualifications or blue slips. That's how it happened in the last administration, and we can't have a back and forth. Whatever our solution it is, has to be something that will stick. And let me just say, with regard to the Federalist Society judicial selection turnstile, if you look at Judge Barrett when she went onto the circuit, if you look at other judges, I had a list in front of me and I've mislaid it. Here it is. If you add up Judge Walker, Judge Rao, and Judge Barrett, their experience when they were put onto circuit courts, as a sum number, it is less than the experience of the judge we're debating today. So the debate over whether he has enough experience is a wondrous thing to me, having watched those three judges dialed through the Federalist Society turnstile and onto circuit courts with far, 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 far less experience than this judge exhibits. So we are in a bad place on this, and I'd like to get out of it, but let me just put those guardrails down. It cannot be that the way we get out of this is that there are blue slips when there's a Democratic president, and it's Federalist Society turnstile with no blue slips when it's a Republican president. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Let me get the music back on. Okay. So, you heard it right there, and that basically explains the situation as it is now. And he's trying to be fair, just like the DOJ when they offered their short list for special masters. They chose 2 Republicans. Trump's attorneys, they had an attorney was one of them, and another judge from the, I guess, from the South. So as you can see, we have a big problem here because the Federalist Society, I mean, they did a real number on our courts. And now the Senate, who used to have a way to at least have a way to block something or at least have some discussion with these blue slips for the circuit courts, nothing. So the Republicans got everything they wanted. As he said, they just run it through, and they have their guy, and they run it through when we have our guy. It doesn't matter. So you can see we're basically dealing with a fight here where somebody's carrying a knife, and we have a pillow. And since we try to be the moral and ethical side, we say, okay, well, I'm not going to go as far as, getting the gun out. In fact, Sandy, you mentioned today, I believe, Hal Sparks. And Hal Sparks, and I love Hal Sparks. I think he's great. I mean, he is fantastic. He's brilliant. But I think what you mentioned was that Hal said that it probably would have been best to just let Steve Bannon do his thing. And just, don't indict him. Just let him steal that money. Because that way the money can't get to Trump. He'd just take it for himself. I think that's essentially what was being said. There's where I would disagree with Hal Sparks. I get the idea of that. But again, it gets into this thing where you do an illegal act to undo that knife fight. And I don't know how you get around it. It takes incredible ingenuity, just like, say, with Merrick Garland and the DOJ prosecutors. They were brilliant. I mean, it was just fascinating how they actually turned the tide on Aileen Cannon and essentially humiliated her. It makes her look small, but they gave her an out. Said, look, we can do it this way, you can do it this way. This way you won't be humiliated. Which I think is a method to get at people. But they gave them the option. Like I say, you can have a YouTube channel and you can humiliate people if you want. And that can be effective, at least for those who deserve humiliation. You know what I mean? But, where do you go with this? My problem with doing the knife fight, knife for knife, my problem with that is things can get out of hand. And especially when they can point it at you. What's the best thing to do? And sometimes you can go too far. I think you only do that when all else is lost. And if you want to go big, then you do what they did on Channel 1. Is I hate her. I didn't want to get into it, but she's a Russian journalist for Putin's propaganda channel. And of course, Ukraine's winning the counteroffensive, and she says, well, they may win this, this little battle, but they have to remember we are a nuclear power. So she's alluding to, okay, you can win all these battles, but remember, we've got the bad boys, and we'll use them if we have to. That's what I would call a last resort. You either go big at the very end and say, look, if you guys are going to take this country like this, and they're right about to get it, then I would be willing to die. And let them do it. I mean, it sounds insane. But if it got to that point, it almost give me liberty or give me death. And that shouldn't be coming from Steve Bannon's mouth. It really comes from the people who are doing things right. You don't do it. But if they took everything, then, who knows what Russia will do. But I don't want to get into Russia right now. That's another thing. So let's take a peek at the votes for Cannon, okay? And it won't be surprising. If I can switch here. Switch. It's supposed to switch. All right. So when Cannon was approved, you're going to notice that most Democrats voted no or didn't vote. Like, for example, Bernie Sanders, not vote. Essentially, that's a no vote. It just, it didn't matter. They knew that they were going to lose, but they would at least show that, they weren't going to approve this person. So voting no or voting no vote, it doesn't really matter. Okay? Now, we're going to go through some names here. If you notice, the one Democrat that sticks out is right here. Again, and this is for a judge from the Federalist Society. And here we go. No surprise, right? And I'm not talking about McConnell either. And then, of course, let's look at the Republicans. I mean, just about all of them voted yay. If not all of them, of course. One, Alexander from Tennessee, he didn't vote. But let's look at Johnson. No, I haven't even looked at Johnson. There you go. Well, of course. And we're going to look at some of these Republicans, too, and see what committees they're on. Oddly enough, Kane voted yay. And I don't know why he did that. That's very disturbing. And Doug Jones, out of Alabama, voted yay. So I guess they really are going to look back. And as I said at the beginning of the show, they're probably saying to themselves, you dumb fuck, why did you do that? Collins, of course, voted yay. Chris Coons voted yay. Maybe they just didn't know. I don't know. Just very bad for any Democrat that would vote for her. Most voted no. I know the 2 New Jersey senators voted no. Most of your Democrats voted no. Gillibrand, no. Or no vote, which is, I say, like Sanders. I imagine Stabenow said no. Yeah. Or no vote. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So Bernie voted no vote. So anyway, that was the vote for Aileen Cannon, the one who knew at that time her decision was going to mean everything as far as our democracy. And Trump went judge hunting, of course. And that's kind of very, very, very depressing because, are we coming to the point where someone can just judge hunt? I got to find the guy who's going to vote for me. That's no different. That's no different than, having a jury and say, I'm not worried about the jury. I just need to have one of them who votes no. See, that's the problem. You get the one Trumper who's going to say, I don't care what you say. Not guilty. Now, Gary I just saw the corner of my eye here. Gary said this, and I assume we're talking about this particular thing I was just mentioning. Gary, if this is what you're talking about, I'm going to assume it is. I agree with you. It just seems so well planned. And this is the thing about Trump that is smart. It's diabolical, but it's smart, is that he seems to layer his defenses out there. Meaning, if I don't get this, I have to have this. If I don't get this, I have to have this. Right? So, with the election, if the insurrection doesn't work, we'll go after the state legislatures. Which I'll talk about in a second. And that's very worrisome because if it's like he's got plan A, B, C, D. He's got so many different plans. So in this case, if something should happen, because he's going to look out for things. I don't know if I can give an analogy, but it's like being in a college dorm room and you're not allowed to smoke pot, so they put towels at the bottom of the door, and you tape up the seals, and so to speak, and you do everything to make sure you don't get caught. And Gary, if that's what you meant, I think that's where you get your help. I think that's where, as a CEO, Trump had control. Because he knew all the different places where he had to have his defenses. And this is why I'm so frustrated, because you see how, oh, we have a win here, but, and I mentioned this in the last video, we appeal and we'll win. It looks like the DOJ should appeal and win. Although the 11th circuit district, whatever, or circuit court, appellate court, I think Thomas has jurisdiction over that, and that's a real bad thing. But it wouldn't matter. As I said before, it keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up. Till you eventually get to the Supreme Court, Federalist Society. And even John Roberts is part of that. A guy who was so worried, about how he was going to look as the Chief Justice. And that turned sour. But he still is a Federalist. He'll still do what he has to do. So again, all roads lead to the top, and the top is worse than the bottom. So the bottom line is you're going to ask yourself the question, are they willing to make a ridiculous ruling to humiliate themselves in order to let Trump win? And at this point, when you weigh the humiliation versus doing the right thing, they're going to allow themselves to be humiliated. I mean, in terms of the intellectuals. Like, I know a couple people who are religious, but in a kind of false way. It's none of you guys. It's just somebody I know. A couple people I know. And they want to come across as intelligent. So if you talk to them about a topic like evolution, they'll say, yeah, I understand that, and I can't say it's wrong. And I think of, the idea that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and God created the earth out of a void. Creationism. So they go halfway. And I say to them, look, if you're doing that because you don't want to be ridiculed, fine. But why even say you're halfway? I mean, there's no real sense to that, because the academic community, no matter how many of you are out there, it could be 2 billion of you, 10 billion of you, the academic community is going to see it as a farce. And you kind of know it's a farce because you know where you're going to go when you're sick. You're not going to open up the Bible. You're going to get your ass to the hospital. And I want to make this a discussion about that kind of thing. But I am relating it towards the idea that these people don't care about even humiliation. I think Roberts wanted something out of this with his dignity and character, but it was false. And the only way he could get that is if we just get killed off and they rewrite the history books where they were the right ones and Roberts was some conquering hero in the courts. There's nothing, well, there are some things worse than a Trump. That would be a young Trump. And Trump wannabes, whether they're in the courts, whether they're his son, cat's out of the bag. They're there. Yeah. Now that's just the courts. And when I say just, I only say that in the sense that it's not only them. But I'm not minimizing anything that's going on. Some more depressing things. I talked about certain states like Utah and other conservative states like North Dakota, Alabama. And you have to look at the senators from these states and what makes them so dangerous. Again, let's go to my web screen. All right, this one I am going to put in my camera. All right, so you'll be looking over there. So we'll look at a few of these senators. What the hell they are. They're assholes. So let's look at the first asshole that we can find. Because in the end, that's really what they are. Mike Lee. I've never liked this guy at all. I mean, not even liked him. I've been sick of this guy for years. He's intelligent enough to know the difference between right and wrong. Between science and voodoo. But this is where I have a real problem with him. Look at the committee here, or the committees and subcommittees he's on. Like, for example, science and transportation. Doesn't even believe in climate change, and he's on the science committee. Now, he knows what's going on. Anybody on the farm knows 110 degree temperatures in California is bizarre. Hottest temperature ever this week, I think. What, in Palm Springs or Death Valley? I don't know. It's just been crazy hot. But look, he's on the subcommittee for communications, media, and broadband. And so we immediately think, no wonder we have these Fox News. We have people in their pocket right there on these committees. And they have to be on a committee. They don't have to be in that committee, but they're part of that committee. You've got to have Republicans on the committee. How do you get through this muck? That's what I'm asking you. It's like jumping through this hoop and this hoop and this hoop. And what you have over here is a son of a bitch. He's an asshole. He's a liar. I mean, you can look at it any way you want, but we've got an asshole who cares only about himself and maybe his family. And look, data security. Where the hell's he with Trump with these top secret shit? These are lives at stake. Where's Mike Lee? Yeah, Sacramento. 116, Karen, right. 122, Death Valley. I heard 127 somewhere. Look at this shit. That's Mike Lee. Let's try to find Ron Johnson. They're all assholes. So let's just look at Ron Johnson. He's from Wisconsin, and we've got to beat him in that election. Which means that he's probably going to cheat. Kennedy, he's another one. Oh, that guy's a real idiot. He's on the Energy and Water Committee. The Justice Committee. Or subcommittee. Let's find Johnson. Anybody here from Wisconsin? I mean, I don't know which guy I hate worse. Okay, here we go. So Johnson's on the science committee, transportation. So forget about having, maglev trains. No, can't have that because this asshole wants, the truck that just belches all kinds of fumes. Subcommittee on Oceans and Fisheries. He doesn't give a shit about the oceans. They just want to be on those committees and those subcommittees simply to muck it up. And you know, they might have given a damn about those temperatures in California if Utah had been on the coast, or Wisconsin had been on the coast. And as soon as Georgia had problems with flooding, Marjorie Greene wanted that federal aid. It's no wonder people have depression. And I'm not talking about anybody specific in this one. This is all across the board. Because you lose all faith, not only in government, but in human beings. I mean, how low does a person go? Right. And he's the guy, I believe, who was okay with Russia. Yeah, sorry about that, Kim. But what's in a name, right? Look, was it Harvey Weinstein? Well, I'm Weinstein, but no relation. Somebody once asked me. I remember one time, I guess I was still in another district and was in a classroom, and somebody's last name was Latorno. I asked the kid, by any chance, you're not related to Mary Kay Latorno, are you? And she looked at me, she said, Latorno, hold it. Oh, that hoe? No way. You know, I remember a kid said that years ago. It's actually kind of funny. Because the kid actually knew who she was. You know. Yeah. So let's just take a peek at some of these people. Like, look at like Kennedy. This guy from like Mississippi, I believe. He's a real winner. Okay, John Kennedy. Okay, he's no Jack Kennedy, that's for sure. All right, so all these people in subcommittees for science seem to be the dumbest people ever. Subcommittee for energy and water. He's from Louisiana. Okay, my apologies. Homeland Security. Where was he when Trump had the documents? Education. How many of you would have liked to have lived a life growing up in Louisiana, going to high school there in some of the poor areas? So sad. It's like the people there in Jackson, Mississippi. Not only is there water shit, literally like shit in there, but they have to pay for it. Where's the governor? Yeah. Every one of them, they're entrenched. And this goes back to the idea you have the courts now mucked up. And their way of dealing with it here, they don't want to be on the subcommittees and the committees to do their job about science and whatnot. They're there to fuck things up. And I have to give credit to people like Sheldon Whitehouse and even Biden. I mean, just how the hell he got that through the last bill. He should be given a Medal of Honor to try to get that through, whether you liked it or not, given what the hell he was facing. I don't know how the hell he got it. But like I say, I don't see how we can avoid this now. Because even the Federalist Society, like a Federalist, and I probably chose my words poorly, the Federalist Society did believe in the written word of the Constitution, but the Federalist Society, not the Federalists, it's morphed into something different. It's this old way of looking at it is the way we're looking at it, and it's going to help us do what we want. And where I'm going with this is they're going to say that the law applies to like state legislatures. So no matter where Biden or where a senator or even a governor wins in any state, somehow if they have the legislature there for them, they can win. And through the gerrymandering, it's locked in. So it's all so depressing. But I wanted to lightly, but yet with some type of form, see where everything's being mucked up. And I don't know where you go with it. I mean, when do they give in? You know, I don't know. I know that I'll switch to Russian history. You know, the serfs were freed, I think it's in 1862, before the Emancipation Proclamation. And many of them were free before that, but throughout the whole country they were finally freed. And part of the reason why they were freed was really two things. I think it was Alexander I want to say the second? Yeah, I think so. Well, whatever. They finally free them, but there's a big reason why they freed them. You know, you had the Crimean War with the Black Sea, and the Russians got dusted. And there was a chance for rebellion. So they needed the soldiers. They needed to be on the good side of the people to fight wars because they were going to lose them, like they're losing now in Ukraine. You know, eventually Putin's can't just go to the prisoners and hope that that's going to work, unless he decides to go nuclear. But again, getting back to the point, there was a time at which Alexander II, despite the fact they may have still wanted serfdom, and by the way, that put pressure on Lincoln, because I remember there was a letter by Lincoln trying to tell politicians back then that, you know, how can we continue with slavery when, you know, because Russia was looked upon as like the most despotic of the main countries of the world. He says, how can we be worse than them? Because here it's 1862, and all the serfs are free, and they were free in some areas before that. And in 1842. Slavery outside, you know, with Russians getting slaves outside of Russia was illegal, although are banned. I don't think very many people outside of Russia were used as slaves or, you know, purchased as slaves or whatever. It was just, they got them from the home base, so to speak. So I don't think there's any critical factor right now that will make them behave, even if they are evil. You know, what would it take? Would it take the Chinese to invade us with Russia and we're losing, that they'd actually say, oh, you know what? I'm with you guys now. You know, we got to get rid of the bullshit. Or maybe we have to have that glacier just chip the hell off Antarctica. And then the seas go up 10 feet. Oh, I get it. I get it now because Mar-a-Lago is going to be underwater. You know, because it's West Palm, and you know, that would be underwater. The glacier goes. That would be the good thing about the glacier. The Mar-a-Lago killer. But as Dave and I have talked about, the way things are set up geographically, you know, you can't just say, well, climate change should be able to deal with it. No, because it hits us all. All right, I think I have a question here. Gary, you're always good for a question. Can't always answer them. Are those double layered? What the heck here? On the cheap lesson. On the cheap. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I get that. These are my glasses. Got these at Ollie's for $2. Keep losing glasses. I don't know. Oh, to be a lowly serf. Right. Yeah, the serfs. Of course, the serfs were different because it was a different type of slavery. The Russians called the serfs the unfree. You know, they were tied to the land. In other words, if the land was purchased, you moved along with whoever owned that land, and you could have your own little plot of land to grow your food, but because the rich, control that serf, they say, ooh, that looks too good what you just grew, so we want your good growth there. So it was really shitty. Because Russian society back then, the intellectuals, of course, spoke French. The poor would, they were illiterate. A broken type of Russian, I suppose. Folk songs. While the intelligentsia, the rich, were listening to German operas. Freischütz or something used to be an opera. This goes way back. It's like before Pushkin. Freischütz. I know it in Russian. I just don't know it in English. Anyway, the wealthy, they spoke a different language. It wasn't until Pushkin came along where it developed. But it was pretty sad. But anyway, my point is that, is there a point at which they say, I get it. And I don't know that it'll happen. I can't see it. It's like wanting the Phillies to win, and they're always it's going to be like 1964. If anybody's familiar with the Philadelphia Phillies as a baseball team, I think in 1964 all they needed to do was win a couple games, the last 10 games, and things were going great. They had the Rookie of the Year, Richie Allen, and they blew it. And then after that, you just kept feeling they're going to blow it. They're going to blow it. And that seems to be the feeling I have. When you're a kid and you see that from an angle of sports, and now you see it with life. Like, how much do I have to go through with this? But then people like Thomas Paine, the people who common sense say, this is what you have to face as a human being. Maybe that's the mature thing to say, is that yes, it's horrible. This has been the trademark of human society since the beginning. And why, I respect what Emendham says, that, he's saying we should just close this thing all down. And a lot of people look at him and say, well, he's a nihilist, which he's not, but all he's saying is that we've never really gotten anywhere. It's just been mainly blood and gore, even with the animals, with evolution. So let's just shut this thing down and do it as painlessly as possible. And I get that and you keep hoping for the best. Like maybe, because that's human nature. And sometimes, it's like, okay, maybe like the underdog, we'll finally do it. But as you approach death, as you get older, sometimes you become more stoic, maybe more realistic, more pragmatic. The realization this experiment of life. Now I'm getting philosophical, of course, but the cost was too great. And in that sense, Emendum, I think, is right. I mean, at least right now, because what do we have to go through to get this thing right? Is the cost too great? And that doesn't mean give up. I mean, you do have to. You have to fight the good fight. But this thing is out of control. I don't see how we get beyond it. Whether it's climate change, the politics, and even if we do win, well, how do we deal with these other countries, such as Russia, such as China? What purpose does evil serve here? You know, there's this idea that Bulgakov had from the Master and the Margarita that somehow, like, the evil of the devil was something that was a tool to help God make people do things right, you know. And T-Bone, I'm not making excuses for these people who do evil, because it is evil. I mean, they're selfish. But because I'm a determinist, I believe that we become, you know, this thing, our brain, our subconscious, is a result of all the inputs, just like a computer. And that what we feel is right what are the good things that we should do, what is the rational thing to do, is not something we generate from within. It's coming from the outside. And people like Trump, who should know better, they're selfish. But there is a source of this selfish gene, as Richard Dawkins would say. His father. And maybe we just need enough of us to fight them. But you can't just let them do it. But it's not good. And I don't want you leaving the show thinking that I'm giving up the fight. I'm not. I'm just looking at it as a reality, a depressing reality. But you can't let them go scot-free. You can't. So I think that's where I want to leave it. I think it's a short show, folks, but I think that's where I want to leave it tonight. I want to thank everybody for dropping by. Please, if you haven't subscribed or you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, dislike. That's helpful too. We have a Facebook page, which is our mainstay because we have a lot of members there, 1,200 and whatever. So if you are on Facebook, please become a member of the group, post on the site, and we'd be real happy for that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, it's a small channel. You don't have to worry. Usually you don't have to worry about trolls and things like that. We meet here generally every Saturday night. So let's hope that Dave gets better. Thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful, and should see you next week. If not, I'll tell you. But Live, love, and laugh if you can.